Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar news update video. Not too much to talk about here, but this is sort of notable enough that I did want to cover it. I was thinking of should I wait until I see if I maybe can get a review copy myself, but I don't know if that's even going to happen. So anyway, what the news is that the first couple of, there's only two of them, there's two early reviews for Legend of Korra Patterns in Time out. So you can see them here on Goodreads. The first one, there's not really a lot to say about it because it only refers to two of the free comic book day stories that we already know are going to be in there. Otherwise, it's just a general, book was fun, different art styles, everything we know. It doesn't really tell us anything new about the book. But then there's just this one very, very brief review, but it happens to actually tell us what seems to be what all of the stories in the book are. So you can see it says here, a group of comics in which we see how Korra met Naga, so that's friends for life, we know that one. Little Asami with her mother, that's new, we'll get back to that in just a second. Milo helps to find some lost pets, so that is Lost Pets, that free comic book day book. Jinora learns about herself, that's new. Korra training, that's new. Tenzin shares a story from his past, that's Clearing the Air, that's last year's free comic book day book. And Milo and Bumi connect, so that's the other new one, but that's actually the one we know something about, that is this one here. Cat Owl's Cradle by Alexandria Monique. So this is going to be the artist who's doing the upcoming Korra comic trilogy. So you can see here the different stages of it, and look at the final art here with the colors. This art looks exceptional in my mind, and so if this is the quality to expect for the upcoming Korra comic trilogy, I think we're in really good hands here. I think it's going to look incredible. But you can sort of see, I suppose, some of the pages here. It is going to be a Milo and Bumi story. So it's going to be a little bit of action here with some kind of Sky Pirate style stuff. But in general, it seems to be Milo bonding with Bumi, which could be fun because they're the two sort of wild characters of their kind of sibling groups, of course. So there's a sort of similarity there, and it'll be nice to see if they have something a little bit more emotional, in terms of the connection here. They do some good character work in it, but the art does look very good. But I do understand the slight frustration with this one that, hey, there's already a Milo comic in this book. Why is there another one? Obviously, one is just a reprint of a book that came out quite a few years ago. This is a newer comic, but still, given that it doesn't look like quite a few characters are getting focused stories in this anthology, it's frustrating that Milo technically gets two. So my hope for that one is that Bumi maybe ends up having a little bit more of the focus there, but we'll see how that actually plays out. So that makes sense. 7 stories listed here. I think that's the way it's ultimately going to work out. So 3 reprint books, 4 new comics, and it looks like Beach Wars won't be included here, which I think makes sense because this book was originally meant to come out in April, which is before Free Comic Book Day this year when Beach Wars came out. So even though it got heavily delayed, there was no opportunity to fit that one in. So that will just be left on its own until I suppose they come back around and do a second Korra comic anthology or reprint it somewhere else. So let's go through these. Little Asami with her mother. This looks, just on the very basic description, to be the standout story here. This is something and I think many others have been asking for a while. One, just Asami to get the focus of any story, but an Asami flashback kind of story is also very, very good, because this looks like we'll get to see obviously what young Asami was like, but also I guess we'll get to characterize Yasuko, who is Asami's mother, which was something I was wondering if they would kind of do at all, given that she seems to take so much after her father in many regards. It will be interesting to see if this goes into any depth on, okay, what aspects of Asami do come from her mother and what exact way they'll play this, in that, is there any chance that this is the story of basically how she died, that incident, or is this just meant to be a more nice kind of moment flashing back to a nicer time when the family was together, of course. either way, I think this will be good because it'll help Asami's character to just get to see, you know, what she was like beforehand. It'll help Yasuko as a character, and developing Yasuko helps, of course, both Asami and Hiroshi in terms of like this further explains like this is why the loss of Yasuko was so like impactful on Hiroshi. This was such an important character to the family, and so on. I'm very eager to see what that is. Again, the likelihood here is that this is only going to be a 10-page story, like they all are. 7 stories. The book's going to be about 72 pages of content, so that leaves 10 pages each. I think all the free comic book day books are 10 pages, so likely these ones are as well. There might be some variation, but at most we're looking at 10, 12 pages for this. So again, this is not something where we should expect a massive amount from, but this should be really, really good for anyone wanting more Asami focus. Really excited to see that. Jinora learns about herself. This is interesting because a Jinora-focused story, I'm all for. Really like the character. It's obviously not a great description, I suppose. Maybe it is when I actually get to read the book, but this seems to be sort of like, I guess, what Jinora, like, reflecting on herself. Like, what does she learn about herself? That's an interesting one there. She learns about herself. I don't know, like, is it just her reflecting on her journey? Because I would actually like something like that, because I don't think they did all that much particularly important with Jinora in book 4. After the amazing development across book 2 and 3, she was just sort of like there in book 4. Some good moments, but ultimately I don't think they delivered in the same way that I think people wanted them to deliver in book 4 with Jinora. They've begun to sort of include her more in the comics, and hopefully when we jump back in, we'll see more about how more of a leadership role she's going to have in the new Air Nation going forward. And I hope that's kind of what they maybe reflect on here, of like, this is Jinora now as a master, reflecting on how far she's come, maybe on where she's going to be going forward, that she quote unquote is the sort of next in line for like leadership in a way of the new Air Nation. And she's going to be key in terms of the, you know, whatever they're going to do with the central spirit portal in terms of looking after that, helping people learn to be more spiritual, going into the spirit world. Jinora has to be at the center of that, and will they use any of that to their advantage in this? But a Jinora, what seems like complete focus story, unless she's maybe talking to like her father or mother about maybe like more of what she was like when she was like very young or something like that. I'm not really sure what to necessarily make of that. The most vague description here is just this one. The other one that we don't know about, Korra training. Now, this is one where you obviously think about what time period is this set in. Because if this is sort of like, say, book 4, post-book 4 Korra, like in the comics, doing training, it's like, okay, there's a chance for some reflection there, but ultimately that is a, you know, core training is kind of what we expect. So unless they're just going to go through like whatever her routine is and really kind of highlight that and that kind of physical aspect of her as an avatar, I think it's maybe better if they choose to do it where it's like Korra training prior to the series. So this is like, say, 12-year-old Korra, 14-year-old Korra, maybe in the middle of like her earthbending training. Maybe in the middle of her waterbending training or something like that. Just earlier Korra doing some of that kind of training, there's maybe an opportunity there. But again, why is this a story that's being told now? And what's going to be the significance of this? Is she training on her own, or is it with other characters? Because this is an opportunity here to include the likes of, like, she might train with Asami. She might train with Mako, with Bolin. There might be a sense of maybe a pro-bending connection if they want to bring that back up. For the most part, it does look like, in terms of the characters who seem to be left out quite heavily here, Mako is not in any of the previous free comics or even Beach Wars. It doesn't look like he's going to be in Kat-El's Cradle by the looks of things. Unless there's a framing device in the flashback story with Asami that includes some of the crew, he's likely not going to be in the Asami one. I'd be surprised if he plays any significant role in the Jinora book. So for Mako to have any sort of a role in this book at all it probably has to be in this Korra training one here. And even then, probably not as a focus character. So what are they going to do here? I wouldn't mind just a fun thing of like just seeing Korra doing her training and maybe just include some of the other characters with that. It's interesting because you could definitely interpret it as like, does patterns in time mean that quite a few of these books are actually flashback stories? Like, what if in some way that was what they're going for here, in that in the new stories that some of them are trying to be flashback focused? So, you know, how Korra met Naga is a flashback story. Little Asami and her mother is a flashback story. Milo and the Lost Pets thing, you can maybe say the guy they meet in that is like partial flashback, but it's not really connected that much. Jinora learns about herself, if it's reflecting on the past, could be flashback related. Korra training could be set in the past. The Tenzin story is set in the past. The Milo and Bumi story seems to have a present day story, but Bumi could talk about an event from his past if it's about the two of them connecting and maybe bonding over how similar they are in some ways. You can see maybe that's what the patterns in time dynamic seems to be about. But what it does seem like is that the cover is maybe a slight bit misleading in that it doesn't necessarily seem like there's a full-on Korra Sami story. And if there is one, it probably has to be the Korra training one, but we'll see if that's in fact what they go for. So it'll be interesting to see how people react once we properly get to see what exactly this stuff is. But I just wanted to do a little bit of a breakdown here while there's not much going on in the news of some actually quite substantial news about this book, because this is the thing I do want to talk about here as I bring up the official description here. So here's the Patterns in Time description on the Dark Horse website. You can see it's super non-specific. Your favorite characters from Team Avatar and beyond are here in this collection of stories. From the heartwarming to the hilarious, join Korra, Asami, Mako, Bolin, Tenzin, and more familiar faces from Legend of Korra in this, collection of short stories. By the sounds of things, Mako isn't really in any of these stories. Bolin doesn't seem to be featured all that much in them either necessarily. I think he at least appears, I guess, to some degree in some of them. Maybe we'll see. But it is interesting that this is so vague. It seems to just be the description from almost before they had even decided what was going to be in this book at all. We only know for sure that the 3 free comic book day books are in here because on Edelweiss, for instance, it has preview pages and it lists those books, and it was fairly obvious, I think, that they were going to be in there. But what I don't get is, why don't they just full on say what is in these books? Why do we have to hear from one of the first early reviews what's actually in the book? I especially when there are only 7 stories here. I really don't understand why there's no specificity whatsoever. And you just know that when this book actually comes out, there probably will be a description on the back of this book that probably does describe in a little bit more detail what the thing is. I just feel like they haven't done a great job at marketing this, given that this was meant to be the book to sort of celebrate, and I suppose ultimately still will be the book to celebrate the 10-year anniversary of Korra, but they've not made that clear, and obviously the delays have not helped. It's been one of the most heavily delayed books we've seen, and it's been silly in a way what's happened to it, but there's been very little talk in terms of the details about this book. So like I said, I have requested a review copy of this book. I have not been refused directly yet, one of these ones, in terms of they flat out said no. But I have had a few times where they just have not responded to the request. They've just sort of let it time out. So we'll see what happens. I think I've caught it somewhat early in terms of when the review copies have gone out. It might just be a few days before I hear back about it, but obviously as soon as possible, if I do get it, I will do a review. And of course, I will say a little bit more about the book than this review or this review. Obviously, without full-on spoiling everything, but I think people do want to know what is actually in here. Because it's not been a good year for Korra in terms of us actually getting content. So this is quite an important release in that regards. So I think that's everything that I want to talk about here. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on this. Now that we seem to fully know everything in Patterns in Time, what are your expectations for these stories? Asami and Yasuko, Jinora kind of solo reflection story, Korra training, and then Cat L's Cradle confirmed to be a sort of a book about Milo and Bumi sort of like connecting / bonding. What are your thoughts on those as the new story content in Patterns in Time? But beyond that, we are just basically waiting for stuff to happen. We're waiting for like the Azula and the Spirit Temple to get like properly announced, so we get a description. We're waiting for the Yang Chen Book 2 to get announced, and maybe a description for that, a cover for that. And then, like, say, the video game, Quest for Balance, we're waiting to see if that's actually going to come out in November, or if there's going to be a trailer at some point soon. So many just, like, things we are waiting for, and that's without even going into any particular depth on stuff. A lot of just waiting at this point in time. In that, like, we're probably going to get news on the live-action show somewhat soon. Avatar Studios stuff probably will be more waiting for next year, but still stuff that we're waiting for. So let me know what your thoughts are on the new Patterns in Time information. Other than that, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.